Hi guys, Ed here on Monday, Monday the 11th, I want to say,
Yes.
May.
Yes.
Relevant date because we've got until the 14th this week to see whether your JobKeeper payments are coming through. So hopefully you're starting to see more and more people with those. Don't panic yet if you're one of the companies that hasn't. But here we are talking all things workplace relations and how they relate to COVID-19. So a few things that I just want to kick off with. I don't know about you guys, but I found over the weekend that I sort of hit a sort of slight wall, I suppose. All the excitement last week of people getting their JobKeeper payments through. And then I picked up the paper today and I was just reading through it, and this chap, Brad Banducci, who runs Woolworths, who seems pretty bloody good at his job, if that compliment means anything to him from me, but he made a comment in here that resonated with me. He said, the big issue for corporate Australia is that the adrenaline is coming off. And that sort of, for me, felt like quite a symptomatic thing over the weekend. There's been this huge adrenaline rush for us all with JobKeeper, particularly, and then suddenly the payments start to come through, and there's a bit of an adrenaline drop after that, where you kind of feel like you just sort of slightly collapse into a heap, as a number of you did at the weekend, I'm sure, just saying, crikey, that was stressful, worrying about that. Still is for a number of people, waiting to see whether those payments are going to come through. But it's going to be a very real feeling, I think, for business owners at the moment. I always think of the metaphor as this, that at the moment through this crisis, we've been kind of sprinting. And for anyone that's ever done that, and I suspect we all have at some stage or another, you will find that you can't go for very long. And there's always a risk, I think, as small business owners, that you think it's a sprinting job when it's not. It's a long distance running job. But we've all been asked in the midst of our big long distance runs that we're all on as small business owners, just to suddenly start sprinting for 6 weeks, which sort of been doing. We're starting, I think, to fatigue a bit. And when you get these outcomes like JobKeeper, you end up sort of collapsing a bit and forgetting to carry on with the run. So one of the things that we need to be working on is continuing, or I suppose remeasuring our pace, catching our breath, but acknowledging that we're still in the midst of our small business long distance run, and we need to carry on in that regard. The big thing for us in making sure we don't even nap for a day or rest for a day is that JobKeeper's one thing, and a number of you, as I say, will still be waiting on that and getting it over the next few days. We'll keep talking this week about that, particularly as we get to the 14th. I've already spoken to a couple of clients that were worried that they hadn't heard yet. And I was saying, look, there doesn't seem to be a rhyme or reason at the moment. Don't stress for now. It's obviously concerning the more and more people you hear about getting it and you haven't, but don't stress for now. Let's see how this week goes on. And then behind that, what you don't want to be doing, and actually we had an instance of this morning in our crisis management meeting kicking off the week. It was lots and lots of talk about JobKeeper and the impact and outcome of that for us. And we had to pause and say, guys, what is happening in Australia and New Zealand for us with regards to the staging of the return to work and out in society, because that impacts our clients as well. And probably amidst it all, you've been getting information for your particular state. If you're in New Zealand, your country, working out what on earth is going on for the phased return to some form of normality. They've started in New Zealand, they're talking about going to what they call the stage 2, which I think the Prime Minister's speaking on today over there. Over here, just to keep things confusing, they're going the other way around. So New Zealand's gone 4 down to 3 and now talking about 2. And over in Australia, there seems to be a staging process that's starting with Prime Minister Morrison talking about stage 1. But interestingly, what he's done, and I understand the reason for it in the sense that he doesn't actually control many of the facets of life that will see us return to some form of business normality. But he quite weirdly was very concessionary on Friday and just said, it's over to you, states, you go for it, which has caused an almighty, I can't think of the polite term for it, so I'm not going to say what I think it is at the moment, but it really worries me. It feels like we're just about to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. You know, we're in such a good position when you look at it relative to the rest of the world. Both in terms of the infection rates and the deaths that we've suffered here and in New Zealand, to now be fumbling the return to some level of normality is just infuriating to me. I've been working with the team here on getting some updates, just for Australia this is, but I have no less than 6 sheets of A4 paper with all of the different confusing and contorted measures that each different state is going through at different times on different days and different stages. Down to, one state says you can have 20 people in a swimming pool, someone says you can have 10. And how on earth, as small business owners, are we meant to be dealing with that? I'll give you one idea. We can help you with that if you're a client of us, and we'll work through those problems for you. But it is infuriating. You had the chief medical officer say that he doesn't like the idea of hot desking. Well, what does that mean? On the one hand, you're saying we've got to have big spaces between people in our workplaces, but on the other, you're saying that we can't have these sort of adaptable, agile working environments. And is that a rule, or is that just you don't particularly like it? And there's all this sort of confusion that's coming through. And I went through and just scribbled some notes on the kind of conflict that we're seeing that impacts us all, not just as employers, by the way. This is really in how you're managing your business and what you're permitted to do as a business owner in the services that you're providing to the public. It's not just how you're going to get your employees back, but it's also your bread and butter, what it is that you're allowed to do. So we already know that WA sort of went off on its own thing from the 27th of April, saying that you could do those indoor and outdoor non-work gatherings of 10 people. You could do outdoor personal training, but not sharing equipment. That's baffling. Like, how are you going to start doing that? But oddly enough, they've said that it's not until their stage 2, which starts on the 18th of May, that we will see some change to things like those outdoor and indoor fitness classes. You're suddenly allowed to use shared equipment after that. And then some stage in mid-June, once they get to stage 3, they're saying public playgrounds, outdoor gym equipment, skate parks, etc. can open. New South Wales, on the other hand, is saying that you can do that now. Well, not right now, on May the 15th. They've decided that stage 1 occurs. So it's way off in mid-June in WA, which seems quite open in the way that they're approaching things like regional travel, which should hopefully be a bit of a boon to at least the local tourist industry and so many people that are working in small business in that industry. But on the flip side, things like playgrounds are still closed, but they're not in New South Wales as of May the 15th. For some reason, New South Wales is doing May the 15th for its stage 1, but South Australia is doing it from today. You've got regional travel occurring in South Australia, which again seems far more open, but then it says you can only do outdoor dining at cafes and restaurants up to 10 people versus up to 10 people indoor in New South Wales. And this is just an absolute mess for small business. And it frustrates the hell out of me that after all of this, with the patience that's been shown, that when it came to the time to execute, unfortunately, the federal government, instead of corralling all of the various egos and problems that exist at state level, they've just handed it over to them to make decisions that impact people's livelihoods, not just within their state, but cross-border as well. We're wrangling with the fact that we have offices in each different state, and we're trying to suss out exactly what we do with our staff members in different states and what are the obligations there and so forth. It's a complete headache, and the problem with headaches is that it tends to increase cost. Now, the last thing we need at the moment is increases in cost, whether it's because you're required to start putting in extra measures within your workplaces that mean that you've got to pay to have amendments done to your physical fit outs in your offices or shops and so forth. or whether it's just the fact that you can't have people working for the same shifts. They're encouraging people to come in at different times, all sorts of confusion that really is, bear in mind that I run a company that's expert in this stuff, and it's still bloody hard for me to work out. And that's, by the way, why we're saying to our clients that there is no additional cost to us coming out and consulting you on this. We want to get out and help cut through the nonsense and noise as to which state's doing what when, and what that actually means for you, first of all, as a business. What can you do vis-a-vis your health and safety requirements? And second of all, as an employer. When you look at that, there was sort of some frustrating media again at the weekend, which is just still taking that very employee-centric view of the way in which things like JobKeeper are working, but also now in safety. There was a suggestion in the Sydney Morning Herald, I think probably published in The Age as well, that employers can be liable for you catching COVID-19. Really? That just seems like such a negative sentiment. I'm not saying that it's wrong. It is technically correct. But in a circumstance where people get sick at work by cross-transmission between staff members all the time, you catch a cold or you catch flu, these things happen. Now, in a world where workplaces are trying to muddle their way through what the government is saying and it isn't saying, are we really going to end up in a world where no-win, no-fee lawyers are chasing down employers because someone got sick maybe in their workplace because there wasn't enough hand sanitizer on the day? That feels to me like a really messy circumstance. It's not that it's not real, it's just a really disappointing narrative that people are not looking forward to what we need to do to get back to work and collaborating on that. Instead, you're starting to see this quite destructive narrative about suing each other. There was a lot of information that came out of the Fair Work Commission last week saying that unfair dismissal claims are 60% up from the same April last year. Now, I think a couple of things to bear in mind. I'm not convinced that 60% up is directly related to COVID-19. It would almost be too quick to see that come through, to have people getting dismissed and suing within the month. There may well be an increase in unfair dismissal claims over the coming weeks, but what I'm reading in the media there is very, very different to the narrative that we hear from our clients, which is that people are desperately trying to help out their employees. And if anything, I've found that people have been far too focused on helping their employees to the potential expense of their business. And that's the prevailing sentiment I see in small business. And it's just really bloody annoying to hear the other version of that, which is a sort of destructive sentiment that's come out in the media at the weekend and has been a bit pervasive for the last few weeks, to be honest. So, look, you and I are not going to solve that particular problem. That's where it is. All we can do is stay out of actually that denial drama phase. I've made a commitment to myself this week that the one thing I'm not going to do this week is start reading the English media at 10 or 11 p.m. at night, just before I go to bed, where what I've been doing is reading what they're doing at the start of their day and getting really irritated about the mismanagement of getting people back to work over here. Doesn't impact us as a business at all in Australia and New Zealand. It just leads me to getting really irritated and not sleeping very well as a result. So I've committed to myself that I'm not going to look at that overnight. You'll have your own versions of that. And it might be that I need to start slowing down on consuming media about employer beat-ups that are in the press over here, because they do frustrate me as well. What I need to do is stay in the crisis management, planning and opportunity phases that we've been working through together. Just a brief update on that before we go on to Q&A. I've got in my diary for next Wednesday a fixed opportunity meeting with my core leadership group here. We're going to sit down and work out, probably in buckets of opportunity, things like what have we seen during the crisis that we can incorporate into our operating model going forward. Classic one for us, for example, is we go out and see every new client that signs up for us. We physically go and see them with an employment relations and health and safety consultant and sit down with them. That takes time logistically to go out and meet everyone, You end up with lots of people not being able to do it, cancelling, rearranging. There's a whole world for us of getting those meetings done. Is there a new world in which people prefer using video technology to get this done more quickly? And we'll look at things like that, which will ultimately save us cost on things like travel. But then we need to look at other opportunities. So I've seen, for example, I think that there's, through the JobKeeper help work that we've done, I've seen a real gap for people getting good commercial advice to help them through challenging situations on things like grants and so forth. Is there a world in which we can help businesses more consistently on that stuff going forward? And we'll be having those discussions next week. So, let's go over to some Q&A. There's still lots of JobKeeper I can see coming through, Stewie. People variously saying that they've received JobKeeper or they haven't.
Absolutely.
And there seems to be no rhyme or reason to it, which, to be honest, just to give you guys some comfort, that's very, very consistent with our team that has been doing the JobKeeper help work here. So they've been helping hundreds of employers with that. And some have got it, some haven't at the moment. There's been no communication to those that haven't to say that there's a problem anywhere. So don't get too twitchy just yet. Remember, it's the 14th of May that the rules say it's got to be done by.
And Ed, just on that too, somewhat contradictory sentiments to kick it off today. One from Karen says, woohoo, just check the bank. The monies are in. And then we have Kathlyn who says, we have 46 eligible staff and still haven't received our JobKeeper payment. I cannot sleep.
Yeah, well, it was Catherine that said that, was it? Kathlyn. So I'm sorry to hear it, Kathlyn. I'm going to give you another slice of bad news with that. When you do get it, and my sincere hope that you do get it by the 14th, you will be so bloody exhausted from not sleeping, you'll collapse in a big heap, and you'll get what when I read that quote out from Brad Banducci, there's a certain fatigue that will kick in because you've invested so much emotional energy in getting this thing. It is a lifeline. Part of the key to running a small business is how you get back up and get cracking again and start getting into a more measurable pace, I think, that you can actually sustain for a longer period, because otherwise we're all going to wash out in the next few weeks.
Yeah. Nice general one from Rowena. How much super do we need to calculate for people on reduced hours? Is it based on new payments or should it be based on regular wages?
So depends a bit on what's happened to them with their new hours. So if you have come to an agreement to vary their terms, they're only working for certain hours, and they should only be paid super on the wages that they earn. If they're on a form of stand down and not doing any work or any hours during that time, or then you wouldn't pay them any super on that. That's your choice as to whether you would. You wouldn't typically do it though.
This from Michelle. We missed the part about reporting your monthly GST revenue in the business portal. It was done on Friday. In the meantime, we had to make another JobKeeper payment round, so we are now 3 fortnights in arrears, putting a big strain on the business. Do you know how long before the ATO will make April payments, given we only filed the info on Friday?
So I'm still hopeful you'll get it by the 14th, given the circumstances. That's it. But the other thing I'd say is get used to 3 fortnights in arrears. That's the reality. That's the reality for May. Yeah, you've just done the first May one. You're going to have 2 more before you even claim for May, which will come back at the beginning of June. So that's going to be a reality on your cash flow for the coming period. My hope is that you just are starting to generate more income as the social distancing requirements loosen up a bit.
Okay. Salison with a scenario. I have a query regarding what happens next. We run a motel and restaurant which is currently doing takeaway with myself doing the cooking. At this stage, we do not require our chef, who had only been with us for 4 months. He is now on JobKeeper. As things move forward and business improves, it's likely we will need to employ him again as a casual. Even with increased numbers in the motel and restaurant, it's unlikely he will achieve the amount of $550 that he currently receives on JobKeeper. As such, What is his incentive to come back to work casually? He's a stay-at-home dad. He only works nights. Can he legally refuse a job when offered?
Good question. It's sort of quite a philosophical one as well, really, in that the incentive of people to come off state benefits in order to do work. It's a constant strain that people get a social security system, but are not disincentivized from working. So remember, there are some perks to job seeker at the moment that won't last forever. The question as to when the additional job seeker amounts will end, and therefore it may be that this chef is more incentivized to come back to work after that. It may be, frankly, that regardless whether there's a financial benefit to it or not, that he or she, I'm not sure, I think it's a he, the stay-at-home dad, who he may just recognise the long-term benefits of getting back into the workforce when people are otherwise struggling, and not just sitting taking job seeker with a short-termist attitude. But probably the best tip there is to carry on. It's not for you to persuade him of his financial circumstances, but you can communicate with him and hopefully give him a view that coming back into the workplace would be a really positive thing. And particularly if you're giving him some idea as to what the future might look like if hours increase and so forth.
This reality check from Clara. I have employees under JobKeeper, but it looks like we won't be able to keep them on regardless, given the cost accruing. Some employees will stay employed and on JobKeeper. Can we make their roles redundant? Do we need to return JobKeeper for April and May back to the ATO? What are the implications?
So there's nothing in JobKeeper that stops you from managing your workforce in the right way, and I'd stress that you should be managing your workforce in the right way, regardless of whether you get JobKeeper or not. I was trying my hardest on Friday to get a new phrase to take off. I'll see whether it works this week, but saying that I want to avoid you guys sticking your head in the JobKeeper sand. We can't just get this full flat on our backs, exhausted from having gone out and got JobKeeper for everyone, and then forget to manage our staff and our business through this. So if you need to make redundancies, you need to do it. If you do, you wouldn't be required to pay the money back as long as you don't receive any money that otherwise hasn't already been paid over to the employees under the JobKeeper scheme. So you would pay them until their last day as to when you make them redundant. And you'd be able to claim JobKeeper back for that period as well.
Okay. A bit of a tongue twister from Ali. We pay our staff weekly. Can you please confirm the payment/fortnight schedule? If I paid my employees on the 1st of April, but it relates to the week ending the 29th of March, is this included within fortnight 1, or is it starting from the next week? That is, week ending 5th of April, paid on the 8th. I'm confused about how to pay by the 10th of May if it relates to the week ending the 10th of May. Paid on the 13th. I hope that question makes sense.
It sort of does. The first part of it, the reality is the scheme starts on the 30th of March, so any payment that relates to a period before that wouldn't be included in the scheme. And basically what you need to do is apportion the $1,500 a fortnight, even though you're paying weekly, to the relevant period, so you've got a decent understanding as to whether you're needing to top people up or not. But most people pay in arrears. You're paying weekly in arrears, and then understandably you're paying a few days after the week finishes, because you need to calculate what the pay is, of course. You just need to work out, looking at it as a whole, what people are getting for each of the JobKeeper fortnights when compared to what they're receiving from you on a weekly basis.
And we might just have to revisit this one that keeps popping up from Craig, and also related question from Tony. Can't pay staff this week until we get JobKeeper. Is there any way of finding out when we get it? And backed up by Tony saying, can the ATO confirm that we will actually get JobKeeper payment, and when? This is becoming so stressful.
Hi, Tony. Yeah, very stressful. You've got a few days to carry on being stressed, unfortunately, before you get it. You may get it today, you might get it right now, assuming that you've done the application correctly. You're not going to hear from the ATO until you get the money. That's what we're hearing from people. You see in the comments here that miraculously the money just appears. So assuming you've done the application correctly. It's an interesting question though, because we've just finished quite a usual fortnight payment cycle, and over the next couple of days people will be wanting to pay what is the third JobKeeper fortnight, but people will be relying on the ATO income to pay the staff. We're in this cash flow pinch at the moment, so essentially the money that you're getting back for April you will be using to pay in May, and the longer the ATO takes to pay you, the more painful that will be. I totally understand that. But unfortunately, you're going to have to sit tight until the 14th. I think you'll get short shrift if you ring up the ATO before then. They'll just say, well, it's not due until the 14th.
This one from Tina, very similar to one we had late last week. Can you define casual that are systematically employed? For eligibility for JobKeeper payments, we have seasonal employees who work through each NRL season. They are taken out of our payroll at the end of each season and then reinstated the following year. I want to ensure they are eligible.
So what happens to them during the season? Did they say they're casual or part-time?
Yeah, basically the question is around the definition of casual and systematic.
Yeah, sorry.
Yep.
So
Yep.
so I've used the litmus test here before. I hope that we've heard from a couple of people that work seasonally with the NRL.
Yeah.
I hope it's not just the same person asking me, because I'm not giving you a straight answer. And you just keep asking, hoping that I do. But the reality is that choosing whether someone is a regular and systematic casual is very subjective. There are some rough objective measures, but it ultimately becomes a matter for your choice fundamentally. Now, you saw this last week when Cotton On changed their view as to whether people were regular and systematic. So the litmus test that I would suggest using is, if in your case you're coming up to an NRL season, they've presumably already started for you just before the shutdown. And then if you hadn't called them up for that period and said, hey, I've got these shifts for you, would they have given you a call and said, where's the usual call? I work for you every season, what's going on? And vice versa, if they rejected, if you sent them a message and they rejected the work, would you be surprised? Would you give them a call? And there's an argument to say that regardless of the fact that it's seasonal, that it is regular and systematic, if that's the nature of the relationship. But if it's just so seasonal that it's like, you know what, every time we get round to a new season, I have to work out if that season is going to be regular and systematic. If that's the case, I don't think that is a 12-month long-term casual. So.
Okay. Rochelle asks, I have a restaurant and was just wondering if you have to pay JobKeeper for staff that are currently stood down and not working. If you're not sure, actually not sure if you will need them when you reopen.
It depends. If they're eligible and you're otherwise eligible and applying for JobKeeper, then you have to. So the question of eligibility is, were they full-time or part-time at the 1st of March? If not, were they regular and systematic casuals for 12 months at the 1st of March? So that'll be the question. And if they're any of those three and not subject to any of the exclusions, then you would have to pay them that regardless of the fact they're not working. If you're not sure if you'll need them, that's kind of what JobKeeper's for, is the not sure, because the hope is, rather than just letting them go, that you keep hold of them in the hope that when you do reopen, that you do need them. That's what the government is hoping. If you look at your planning and say, you know what, I'm not confident that I will need them, then you should look at taking those actions now rather than chucking them on JobKeeper and sticking your head in the JobKeeper sand, as you're going to hear me saying a lot.
Maria says, if we're on JobKeeper and we ask a staff member to take 2 weeks annual leave, do we deduct the normal full 76 hours from their accrued leave, or do we process $1,500 JobKeeper top-up and only deduct the difference in pay in equivalent hours from their accrued leave?
Oof. Don't know. I can answer that without seeing it in writing. The general principle of JobKeeper is that you can ask someone, and they can't reasonably refuse to take leave, subject to that 2-week requirement that you've got to leave them with 2 weeks. and you would then just pay them ordinary wages in accordance with what you would normally do on annual leave, and then you'll get the money back from JobKeeper. That's the basic principle. I'm not sure about the technicalities of how you would bookkeep that, so to speak.
This from Lillian. She's a client. She says, sadly, one of our casual employees made the decision during lockdown to start up her own business and has undercut us and poached the clients she was working with through our disability NDIS service. She collected JobKeeper from us on Friday. She has requested if she is able to work for her own business plus be employed by our service. I'm thinking not. When do we cancel the JobKeeper so she is no longer eligible?
Hi Lillian, thanks for your business. It sounds like you've got an employment relations issue first and foremost there, which is that you need to deal with this question of her going off and competing. Has she breached any covenants that she has with you? Sorry, Siri thinks I'm talking to her in the background. Has she breached any covenants with you that you need to manage that through that? Is there a disciplinary issue? Is it going to end in the termination of her employment? If it does, then you would stop JobKeeper. It's pretty frustrating to be giving her JobKeeper, which sounds like it's funding potentially a competitor of yours now. So you need to wrangle that question first. We'll give you a shout on that, Lillian, as well.
Okay. Yeah, another one here regarding regular and systematic this time from Mel. I have a casual who meets the regular and systematic criteria and will be receiving JobKeeper, but is refusing to take on any extra shifts. Do I have any rights here? Can she potentially be disqualified from regular and systematic on this basis? Or is she under no obligation to do extra shifts than the hours she worked prior to JobKeeper?
Really good question, Mel. So you're at risk of finding yourself in that trap that we're seeing in the media quite a bit, which is it's being portrayed, I think unfairly, of how dare employers ask someone to do more shifts. Now, you're entitled to ask that, but if the person says no, but I will do the shifts that I was doing beforehand, then you couldn't subsequently turn around and strip them of JobKeeper, and you'd probably end up in a bit of a mess, even if not in the Fair Work Commission. You don't want to be the next news story about this. You're perfectly entitled to ask employees to do that extra time. You just can't require them to do it. You can't say, look, if I'm giving you JobKeeper, I need you to do more. Is the short principle.
Okay. From Tony, I'm still awaiting a decision from the ATO. As a business, I have not lost 30% in work, but I do have 2 care workers who have lost many hours of work and income because their clients have stopped their care service due to COVID-19. Can they gain the JobKeeper from me?
Could we do that one again? Sorry.
Yep. I'm still waiting for a decision from the ATO. As a business, I've not lost 30% of work, but I do have 2 care workers who have lost many hours of work and income because their clients have stopped their care service due to COVID-19. Can they therefore gain the JobKeeper from me?
It sounds like they're not employees of yours if they've lost 30% of their income. It sounds like they are potentially contractors, and if they're contractors, then they should be looking at claiming it themselves rather than you shouldn't claim it for them.
Yep. From Katie, can we take back the $1,500 for real estate sales agents on a debit/credit?
So on the way in which debit/credit works is you just, and it's the same with commission only, you just need to see at the end of the pay period what their net position is, and if it's less than the $1,500, then you need to top it up, but you can't take it back off them. You've just got to make sure that they're getting no less than the $1,500 over the course of the fortnight.
Jenny has a 2-part question. If a casual works 1 day, do we pay 1 day as wages and top up to $750 per week, or pay $750 as JobKeeper payment? That's part 1. 2, and as part of getting ready to reopen, a full-time employee who has genuinely stood down will be working 2 days. How do we calculate the annual leave accrual? Is it only on 2 days, or still accrue on full-time hours pre-COVID?
So the second one, just so I can remember that one, is if you've stood them down using a JobKeeper-enabled direction, then people accrue based upon their old hours, not on the stood-down hours. That's a particular peculiarity with stand down. If you had agreed them to that they would have a variation to their contract before JobKeeper and so forth, you'd do it on the reduced hours, but you used the word stand down, so I'm going to assume that you would continue to accrue on a full-time basis. And the first part was?
Yeah, if a casual works 1 day, do we pay 1 day's wages and top up to $750 per week, or pay $750 as a JobKeeper payment?
You pay if they're working 1 day. You pay them wages of their 1 day and then top it up to the $750, $1,500. So you wouldn't just assume pay them the $1,500. You need to calculate the fact they've worked 10 hours for you.
Yeah.
I saw one coming up here. I don't know if you're going to go over it, but the old Strathfield Council question from Friday. So I just wanted go over that again. So I looked into this for you. So what happened on Friday was this: is that earlier last week we were asked the question, can you make your staff download the COVID Safe app? And my initial reaction was a bit like it would be to any question where there's an enforced requirement in someone's personal life. It's very sort of uncomfortable for anyone specialising in employment relations, questions like that. So another classic would be, can I make my staff get the flu jab? See the NRL at the moment, that's an exact example of that going on, that people don't like employers telling them what to do with themselves in their personal capacity. So my initial reaction to the app was, oh, it doesn't feel right. Then I thought about it and I thought, well, all the app is doing is, if you ignore the privacy issues, it's meant to help understand who you've had contact with in order to trace any potential problems with COVID, and arguably therefore it's a necessary part of creating a reasonably safe workplace. And therefore you could ask your employees to do that. Now apparently Strathfield Council did that, and there was some suggestion that in fact that breached the terms of the app and actually potentially exposes the council to a legal liability. Now, with due respect to the masthead that was in, it's not an employment relations specialist document or news outlet, so we're looking into it at the moment to try and work out exactly what's gone on there. What I would say in the meantime, just to be comfortable around this, don't get into any bitter disputes with your employees about getting this app downloaded. People do have strong views about their privacy, understandably and fairly, but you could reasonably ask your employees to download it and explain the purpose of why you want them to. Now, if they say no, then I'd put that on ice for now. I wouldn't make it a condition of returning to work, but I'd say that you're trying to do all you can to create a safe workplace. Would you be happy to please ensure that you've got the app? Remember that you've got no real idea if they've got the app or not anyway, so be a bit careful of this. I might say to Stewie, I don't want you in here unless you've got the app, and he might just nod and say yes. But I don't have access to his phone. I'm not going to get any information from the app. That information is just going back to the government to work out the tracing. I don't have access to Stewie's personal data as to where he's been and who he's been in contact with. So ask yourself what real benefit there is to the employer anyway. Save that you feel like you're doing the right thing by the contact tracing and getting as many people onto it as possible. But I wouldn't start having fallouts with people about it, is my position. We'll confirm the position once we've really bottomed out exactly what that article said.
Great response. This is from Sam. We have field-based staff who pre-COVID would meet a lot of clients face-to-face. Do you suggest we can start easing our own restrictions so those types of meetings can now resume? Or should I err on the side of caution and stick with Zoom?
Sounds like Sam works for Employsure. That's exactly our problem, Sam. I don't know if maybe you do. Maybe you're one of our managers. Sam in Queensland, Sam Duffy maybe. But I'll assume you're not, and that you're another business that's going through the same challenge. The approach that we're taking at the moment is that we think on a technical reading of the rules across the country, you are entitled to meet face-to-face. However, the way in which we are approaching it with our staff and with our clients is not to enforce that in any way. We are saying this. We're saying, first of all, we do that at the discretion of the client. We ask the client what they want to do. So there's plenty of industries out there. Classic one for us would be something like logistics that are operating. They've been so busy they sort of have not quite noticed that the world's changed outside for them. So they're quite used to having people still coming in and out of their workplaces. So we ask them if they want to do it. Even if they say no, we might prod a little and say, you do realise that you can do this, in order to help them understand what they could be doing with their business and making sure they're gripping hold of that. But if they say yes, we then go to our workforce and ask who wants to do it. We don't force any of our staff to do it. But we also, on the third point, is we have a series of questions that says that the meeting won't go ahead until we've had confirmation of X, Y, and Z from the client, including things like whether they've got social distancing precautions in place. So that's the process we're going through, and that seems to work for now. So I'd recommend something similar for you, Sam.
Question from Ali, a different Ali, I think. If we did start to downsize staff due to no pickup of business, do we wait until JobKeeper finishes? We're a small business with 6 employees and don't have to pay redundancy.
So, sorry, I just got distracted. I just saw one. I don't know if I can scroll back. Yep, I can. Amanda Wood quite rightfully points out this thing with the app, that the Biosecurity Act that was cited in the article as well seems to say we can't make staff download the app on their phone. And the article seems to suggest that you couldn't then take adverse action from against someone who doesn't do it. That's exactly what we're trying to bottom out at, Amanda. It just sort of, I'm not saying that's wrong. I think it's probably right. I just want to bottom it out. But just don't get confused with what it seems that the Biosecurity Act says, which is you cannot make staff do it. There's quite a big difference. It's a bit like the asking people to do extra hours. You can definitely ask, you just can't make. And that's quite a crucial distinction. So be a bit careful on that. Let me get to the bottom of it for you. I know I said I'd do it on Friday, but it's just taking a bit of time to work through it. And we'll come back with a confirmation this week. In the meantime, I think you can ask, just don't make. Sorry, go ahead.
Sure. This one from Ali. If we did start to downsize our staff due to no pickup in business, do we wait until JobKeeper finishes? We're a small business with 6 employees and we don't have to pay any redundancy.
So, Ali, thanks for the question. Really good one. Don't bury your head in the JobKeeper sand is my view generally. That JobKeepers shouldn't be a distraction for you achieving your business objectives and requirements. So the reality is that if you know you don't need those people, regardless of the fact that you might not have redundancy payments to them, you will have things like notice obligations. So if you waited until JobKeeper finished, you would then be, if you then started doing consultation and going through that process, it will take you time to do the redundancy process, even without redundancy pay. And 2, you will then end up paying out things like notice requirements without the support of JobKeeper. So you're better off doing that now than later.
And Ed, you've touched on this several times today already, but let's just revisit it one more time for Lucy. She's a client from Need a Skip Now. We lodged everything on time. However, we still haven't received a JobKeeper. Is it still likely that we'll receive it, or is it unlikely?
Hi Lucy, thanks for your business. I love nothing more than a business with a business name that says exactly what it does. Need a Skip Now. You might notice that we're quite keen on those types of branding things as well. With JobKeeper Help, Workplace Ready, we try and say it as it is and do exactly what we do, and it sounds like Need a Skip Now does as well. But thanks for your business. Don't worry about not having JobKeeper yet. There's no rhyme or reason to it. I can tell you now from speaking to our advisors about the hundreds of applications they've done. It just seems it's not when the application was made, it's not how big it was. It's not whether it's a sole trader or not. It's not any of these things. They're all slightly different. There's no rhyme or reason. So just wait until the 14th and give me a shout, Lucy, if you're having problems on the 14th, and we'll work out what to do then.
This one from Rachel. Our staff have worked through the lockdown. Staff have been asked to reduce their salaries by 10%. Can wages be reduced below the award rates?
Can wages be? No. It's a short answer. No. Don't slip into that trap. No. There's no. There have been some award variations, but not. No. There's nothing out there that says you can start paying people below award rates. So be very careful if you're asking to do work. I saw one come up from Greg and Bernie there, I think, in Cairns, who we've spoken to a few times through this as well, asking if we work for employees in bullying complaints with their employers. So as a business, we only act for employers. It's fair to say we've had some employees watching through this, and we've answered a few questions in that regard, just on the basis that this is a free-for-all, quite literally, if people have got questions. But as a business, our clients are only ever employers.
From Lucy. When a role is predominantly office clerk work, that is, the work can be done from home, and the employer asks the employee to return to work, however, the employee is worried about the commute on public transportation, can the employee negotiate not to return to work?
So yeah, I mean, as soon as you say the word negotiate, that's all. That tells me you've got a pretty open mind to these things, and maybe those tasks can be done from home. I was asked this internally the other day, and what are we going to do about public transport and commutes? And I said, hopefully not too sharply, I said, look, it's not really, we've got 101 things to worry about, but one of them isn't what's happening on public transport. That's really a matter between the employee and the government. If the government has said public transport is there and you can use it, but you can use it subject to these social distancing considerations, then my view as an employer is if you can get to work and that facility has been laid out for you, then we've got a relationship which I'm asking you to come in. Now, I might be quite open-minded in that, say, you know what, but if you can still do it from home and you don't want to come into work, then I might let you do that. Other employers might not be so open-minded, and you might say, look, that's, whether you sit on a bike, come in a car, sit on a train is not really my business. My business is what happens when you walk through the door here.
Mm. And Ed, in line with our short and punchy 45-minute parameters, can I finish with a comment?
Sure.
This from Alicia of Robbins Accountants. No question today, just a thank you again. You are so real, inspiring, and our team at Robbins Accountants just love having lunch with you. Thank you, Ed.
Yeah. Good. Everyone's having lunch. I'm not having any. The annoying thing, I was hoping I would have lost some weight as a result, but it doesn't seem to be happening. I've got the COVID curse like everyone else in that regard, I think. But good. Well, thank you very much, everyone. I will chase up that issue with the app. Other than that, let's keep. I think we're going to put up on our website today, employsure.com.au/workplace ready, I presume. We're going to put up some sort of table up there which will help translate all of the different confusing things that are going on in different states. They go right to the heart of small business, these bits of confusion. They're so intensely frustrating, but it's saying that, in certain states, community halls can be open and auctions of this and inspections of that, and these are small businesses, and we've got to help you guys cut through what you're allowed to do and what you're not, because we don't want to be finding that we are either getting in trouble directly from the government or our staff are getting sick and consequently causing us health and safety problems. So let's get that information up, and we'll hopefully help you during this week go through those workplace ready questions, and also see more and more of you with JobKeeper help as the week as the week goes on. If you need any help, JobKeeper help is still there if you want to make a JobKeeper application and haven't done it already. Otherwise, we'll be here answering those questions, but just don't panic for now. 14th is meant to be the deadline. Let's see where you all are by then. Cheers.